Welcome to our first Workplace Live session. My name is Rika. I'm a creative content specialist at Insidesource. And before we get started, we're just going to go over a few housekeeping tips. Please keep yourself muted for the duration of the webinar. We will set aside 5 to 10 minutes at the end for questions. Feel free to enter any questions throughout or towards the end of the talk in the Q&A section at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And I think that's all on my part, so I'm going to pass this off to Liz Wirt, who is our Senior Strategist at Insidesource. She will introduce our guests and our topic for the day.
Thank you, Rika, and thank you everyone for joining Insidesource's first Workplace Live chat. The pandemic has really been a catalyst in change and forcing companies to revisit the intersection of people and places. As social distancing is the new norm, we want to explore in this conversation today how to rethink the design and services within your workplace to drive the behaviors around social awareness and accountability. So today we have partnered with co-founders Jen and Jujlia of Teamwerc and Carly, who is the Senior Vice President of Workplace Technology at the Impec Group, to provide COVID-19 workplace readiness and reintegration insights. So to start out, Teamwerc, Jen and Jujlia have been in the industry for more than 20 years. They have quite an extensive background in building workplace strategies and teams from ground up, to name a few: Pinterest, Zynga, and Tesla. Jen, could you describe the meaning behind the name of your company, Teamwerc?
Yes. So when we started Teamwerc, we wanted to provide a workplace leadership as a service. And a lot of people don't know, this is a really fun fact, but you and I have worked 5 companies together, Teamwerc being the 5th. And so when we decided to name the company, we wanted to name the company that was very reflective of our career together and why we love working together so much. And so that's the word Teamwerc came along. And it comes in 2 parts. The idea of team, all things that make workplace happen, everything from the actual employees, the workplace, to landlords, tenants, architects, designers, just everyone involved in making the magic happen. And then everything that we love, all things work, which is actually an acronym for W is workplace, E is employee experience, R is real estate, and C is culture. And today we are going to hit the work pillars and discuss how the COVID era has made an impact.
So how did Teamwerc and Impec start working together?
Yeah, so pre-COVID, coincidentally, we had engaged with Carly to discuss strategies around evaluating technologies on supporting agile workplaces, hoteling, and free address. And then suddenly COVID hit us, and here we are today on this call. I think what really became a reality is that we all know today, COVID is our new reality. I think what was really hard for the 3 of us was that to suddenly overnight, workplace was suddenly categorized as non-essential. And that was hard for me. Where as a workplace professional, I felt like I've spent my career making workplace a safe and healthy environment. And third, what we struggled with was the idea of, while we're under shelter in place, let's just wait and see. We just don't know when, how long. Is this next month? Is it 3 months? Is it 6 months from now? You know, and as workplace leaders, I think we've all been there where we've done build and tenant improvement projects. And we really wanted to take a proactive approach to being prepared and starting the dialogue around reentry into the workplace. And so we decided to go on a discovery roadshow, and we went out and talked to various companies and companies that fell in the bucket of currently under shelter in place, the workplace is in full effect. And then at the second portion of companies that are actually shelter in place, and suddenly the entire workforce is now forced to work from home. And what we learned in this roadshow actually was really interesting. Were 3 things. One, people were paralyzed. Workplace leaders were overwhelmed. They didn't know where to begin within the work ecosystem, all the changes that were impacted. 2, what we all know very well is leadership of these companies were really hyper-focused on real estate. And now that we were on this forced test of working from home, how could we take this work from home strategy and make it a permanent fixture within the workplace? What was that percentage? What did it look like? And did it have an impact in real estate? If we were going to have 20% work from home policy, does this mean that we need less real estate? And then third, things that keep us up at night is do we really have a workplace in the future, and are all our careers at risk? So we decided to address this is to use space as a metric, and we reference the guidelines from the CDC and shelter in place, which we all know very well, which is one, don't touch your face, and for some reason now I always want to touch my face, 2, obsessively wash your hands, and 3, the 6-foot social distancing, which we took that concept of the 6-foot social distancing and we're now calling the 6-foot ring of reality, and we layered that 6-foot ring of reality into an actual workplace footprint, of which Carly will share now.
Yes, thank you, Jen. So as Jen said, as we kind of road-showed and talked to these different customers, the main concern was space and kind of how do I manage my space and how do I get people to come back to work and feel safe with this kind of 6-foot ring of reality, and how do we kind of manage and maintain that? And so what we did is we, hopefully everyone can see my screen. Everyone can see? Okay. So what we did was we used a product called SaltMine to kind of mock it up so that customers can actually see what that will look like and feel like and kind of do to their capacity. So you can see here that we have these 6-foot ring of realities around the spaces. And we, basically it's a 6-foot radius. So we kind of we took out the chairs where you couldn't have someone because they don't abide by the 6-foot ring of reality rules. And we placed them throughout the floor plan. We felt like as we were talking to people, one thing that was really important is that not only could people kind of see and understand, but people really needed to feel what it would be like to go back to work. And so we felt like it was critical to kind of put it in a 3D version. So, you know, CFOs to, you know, space planners could kind of visualize how this will look and feel as we kind of re-enter the workplace. And so you can see here that we do have a model. You can see our 6-foot rings that look so nice and kind of daunting here. We really wanted to focus, or, you know, based on our conversations, the main focus is around conference rooms, occupiable areas, you know, bench desks, offices, cubicles, TV trays, depending on whatever company you are. And then common area, or kind of the community areas with the soft seating. So that's where we really feel like we need to kind of focus our social distancing. And so what we're going to do here for you guys is kind of walk through what it will look and feel like with these rings of realities and what that kind of does to your space. Just hop in this, take a quick walk. So you can see here we're in a lobby. And as I start to walk through this, let's just kind of start our walk. And we will kind of stop at bench desk first. So as you can see, you know, we have a row of 5 desks, and with our ring of reality, we have 2, because with those rings, you can only really have 2 people comfortably kind of seated there. As we keep walking, we'll go to a conference room now. Right here, you can see that in this conference room, we used to have a conference room of maybe 5 to 6, and now there are 3 chairs in there. And how do we kind of manage those rings? Like, now we can see, you know, I can't cross the ring, but, you know, those rings aren't there in real life. So what can we do to kind of manage these rings as we kind of accommodate this 6-foot ring of reality? And then the last area that we'll look at is kind of this common area here, where you can see there's soft seating. So, you know, how can we manage, you know, only sit where the pillows are, or don't sit there at all, or do we replace soft seating with kind of harder, easier to sanitize furniture? And so as we kind of walk through this space, like, people really do kind of get a feel of what this will look like and what it will feel like. And what that means numbers wise is, we'll actually just use a plain old CAD file to kind of look at a glance. You know, we have a floor that had a capacity of 135, and now we have a capacity of 153. After we've applied those rings, we really see, you know, we lost 82 seats. So what does that mean for us long term? How do we get people back to work? How do we help people understand, you know, you can only sit in this seat and this seat in the conference room? And what do we do about the loss in space? And I think there are so many options, and there's so many technologies that you maybe already own, or like SaltMine, you can just bolt on to what you already have. And we just need to develop more of a process around it, right? Or a program to help people kind of get back to work, feel safe. Maybe you move to a hoteling system. So, you know, before you come to work, you have to reserve it. And then once you're, you know, you use all your 53 seats, that's it. Maybe you go to kind of a neighborhooding system where you have 40 desks assigned to 80 people and the teams manage it. maybe you go to some sort of rotating system. And with that, you have to think about, you know, how do we clean those desks? So when you come to a desk that someone else was sitting at, you know, you feel good. If you don't smell bleach, how do you know it was clean? So, I mean, there's all these things that as we kind of started to talk to people, we really needed to start thinking about it. The other thing that we realized is this might be a little bit of a lemonade situation in that a lot of people were talking about going to an agile seating plan anyway. We were already talking about being more efficient with our space. So now's a great opportunity to figure out how do we come up with some sort of agile, more efficient seating plan. And a lot of questions we're getting is, what if this last 2 months and then it's done and I got rid of all my couches for nothing, or, you know, I got rid of half my capacity and I didn't need to. But the idea is that no matter what, it doesn't hurt to be more efficient with the space. So if, you know, you remove half your capacity, if everything goes away in a few months, then, you know, you have 82 extra seats to use as you kind of scale, right? And so we really are just hoping that as we go into this time with so many unknowns and so many hard decisions that we feel like will have to be made, we really just want to use technology to help us make strategic, better, more informed kind of visual decisions, right? And a lot of that will then go to what programs do you have in place? What processes do you have in place? How are you communicating this appropriately to people so that they feel really good about what you're doing? And I think, like Jen said, as far as, you know, workplace being relevant, I think we're even more relevant because who else is going to do it? Like, it's on us to make sure that people can come back and feel good about it. And so kind of with that, and I'll let them talk about all the programs that we've kind of been discussing, but that's kind of the idea, is that how do we get people into a space where we have to be 6 feet apart?
So Jen, how does this affect, you know, occupancy and workplace strategies, especially in a time where, you know, leadership right now is really worried about the bottom line and cutting costs? And so looking at these metrics, can you walk us through a little bit of what that looks like moving forward?
Mm-hmm. We first wanted to address, you know, when the second concern about real estate, we wanted to challenge the percentage of people working from home, if that truly had an impact on real estate, and could you truly reduce real estate? And I think what Carly just illustrated is that if we decide to incorporate this 6-foot ring of reality, we actually need to sustain the amount of real estate or acquire more. We can also see a world where landlords can decide, and we've seen leases like this, where landlords decide that there's going to be a minimum of 150 square foot per person. And that was a typical language you would see in leases. Imagine if they incorporate the 6-foot ring of reality as a minimum. That would change real estate needs drastically. And also talking to a lot of these companies, we mentioned Nguyen that they were overwhelmed. And one of the things we thought that was really helpful is to approach this in a tier approach. Of a lot of these companies had global real estate portfolios of different sizes and how to prioritize. And Jujlia can explain what that tier approach could look like.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. And I think it's a great way to just start a conversation, right? I think what Jen mentioned earlier, through our roadshow, what we noticed, people were just paralyzed. They didn't know where to start. So once we created this floor plan, it was just a segue into having the conversation what this would look like on day one. So now that we actually have a picture of the physical space, we started approaching the first day of business, what we call FDOB, just like any FDOB we've done for other projects, by engaging the various stakeholders. So start talking to your IT team, start talking to your AV team, to people team, to internal comms, and really defining, you know, what is this new experience is going to be like for employees who are coming back. Some of the areas that we address, you know, actually, even before you get to the office, let's say transportation, what is your transportation is going to look like for folks who, you know, don't feel comfortable taking, you know, public transportation anymore? So if now they're driving to work, really looking at your lease, looking at your parking allocation and figuring out, you know, how do you actually provide parking in a safe environment for employees to get to work. Another area is supporting employees whose kids, for example, are still going to be working or, you know, not studying from home, doing the distance learning. So how do we support those employees? Like, do we move into various shifts where employees come in different shifts to work? Things like that we geek out on, you know, shipping and receiving and logistics. Like, how do we now receive packages and what are the new protocols, and do we need to go back and revise the playbooks on how, can employees no longer ship personal packages to work, and how do we retrieve them, and how do we pass them safely? Other areas, of course, everyone is discussing the food and the pantry, and maybe do we do a shift now and look at other amenities and perks outside of these to extend to employees during these times. I think it's a lot to think about, and what Jen already touched on is the tiered approach. What we found out through kind of talking to various companies is, everyone has a very different scale of and landscape of their real estate portfolio. There's companies that have regional offices that would enter workspace in a very different way that a headquarters would. So kind of breaking it down into tiers and say, let's say tier 1 is office less than 50 employees. Let's create a checklist mentioning all those buckets that we just discussed, or the pillars that Jen mentioned, and really talk about, how do we make sure that that office comes back to day 1? What does FDOB looks like for that tier? And not one size fits all. And I think this is just a great way to start that conversation.
For first day of business, through previous conversations, what I love that you said is that, right now a lot of people are feeling paralyzed and this feeling of uncertainty. And so if we can take the approach of just looking at it like it is an FDOB deadline, which we all always have those deadlines, this, might help ease kind of the uncertainty and feelings. Within first day of business, what do you think, Jujlia, are the new essentials within the workplace that might not have been essential pre-COVID?
What we've heard a lot through our conversations, companies are looking to extend the runway. They're looking to cut costs. So and I love what Carly said is, your workplace team is essential. Us coming back to work, we're going to be in the front line. We're going to be receiving the tickets, and employees actually asking, what is okay to do? Where is okay to go? How do I navigate this new space? So I think what essential is for every office and for every tier, which is why I think kind of breaking it down and making it more digestible for each tier would be very, very different. If your office in a co-working environment, and what essential will be actually working with the landlord and figuring out how are other companies in this building are operating, because you can only control, what goes on in your walls, but actually how does an employee navigate through the lobby and activate an elevator and push the button, and how do other tenants in the building are doing it, and what steps is the landlord taking? So engaging not only internal stakeholders, but external stakeholders such as landlords and vendors is super critical, and I think is essential, but also keeping your workplace team informed, and I think keeping the communication open and communicating with employees and letting them know this is what the first day would look like. But I think in order to do that, we need to start talking about it.
Yeah. So going into kind of the workplace team, Jen, you have quite an extensive background in building and leading world-class workplace teams. And so in your mind, through what's going on, how can we and what do we need to do to change our mindset?
Mm-hmm. There's been a lot of self-reflection, I think, on all of us. And I had mentioned earlier that my own personal, concern was whether or not workplace would still exist. And we do know in some shape or form it does. It's just defined. And for me, I had to change my own mind shift. And in my past, when I worked at different companies, I felt like to be a successful workplace professional, you physically had to be in the space. It's called workplace, right? You had to be in that physical space. And what COVID has done for us is suddenly we are managing our careers and the companies remotely from our homes. And we proved that that could happen. And I think, as Carly mentioned, we're more essential than ever because now we are tasked with defining what a distributed workforce looks like and the protocols around that and how to engage technology and to create the metrics, only because there have been a lot of conversations with leadership and they've overly simplified what it takes to be a distributed workforce and the amount of real estate required to support that.
Yeah. So taking us back up to kind of the macro level, when you talked earlier about the four pillars, workplace, experience, real estate, and culture, how is this new ring of reality going to affect those pillars?
Well, for me, I know I've always been an introvert. So the idea that I think a COVID could keep me at home and away from people and germs is pretty amazing until I was forced in this situation. What I think is amazing is it has forced us to engage in other ways, and where we thought technology connected us, it didn't connect us in terms of soul and engagement. And I feel that as we have been working a few weeks now from the home base, I feel more engaged with my colleagues, more engaged with Yulia and Carly. We are forced to be more present in so many ways. And even the things that you're not planning, to see Carly's 2-year-old run across the screen or my dog bark that he needs to go out. I think those are things that keep us human, where in the workplace, it actually dehumanized us.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's a good point. So out of a lot of this information, what are your suggestions, Jen, on what we can plan for today?
I think it's what we're trying to do today. As you all see, we don't have the answers, but we can start the dialogue. And oftentimes when we are talking to clients, they don't know where to start and they don't know how to articulate it and level that up. Right. And we thought that that 6-foot ring of reality was a great visual to articulate to leadership on what it means to transform workplace when we re-enter the workforce and start that conversation.
Yeah. Are there any recommendations for, partnering with leadership and HR when having those conversations about the ring of reality and these space plans and real estate strategies?
Always. Like Julia mentioned, it's one thing to say, let's plan for a reentry into the workplace where we have decided to do a 50% work from home and a 50% agile workplace. But then if you factor all these other things that are out of our control, for example, kids still working from home and studying from home, what does that mean? Are we going to then allow kids to go and join their parents? And how do we incorporate that as part of the agile workplace seating? So those are the other factors that are out of our control that we have to think about and how to incorporate in our workplace strategy.
Are you seeing that people are starting to maybe rethink the workplace perks to attract and retain, top talent? I know in the past, especially in the Bay Area, a lot of trends of, kombucha on tap and food and beverage, Michelin, star restaurants. That's definitely going to change. And so do you see more social awareness within benefits packages for possibly maternity, paternity leave, childcare? Are you seeing a trend in that starting to happen with conversations with HR and leadership?
Definitely. Definitely we see a trend in terms of perks and benefits being geared towards family, childcare, like you said. Other perks is how do you, as you mentioned, how do you redistribute perks such as snacks and pantry to the home base? Is that even possible? How do you create that physical workplace environment so that you're addressing ergonomic issues? What does work from home look like? And how do we articulate?
Yeah, how do you create culture through that? How do you see design being kind of more important than ever right now, and not just in the built environment, but also through wayfinding and graphics to support, a lot of the new social norms that are in place?
I think it's going to be more important. I think right now, I think we can all experience that even when we're, for example, you and I, we've worked together for years, as you all know. We don't even know what the norms are when we get to see each other again, face to face, if I'm even allowed to hug her, right? I think those are the things that as a company, we need to write that out of how do we socially engage so that it doesn't become uncomfortable. And I think then in graphics, I mean, before this all happened, we as workplace were always moms, reminding people to clean after themselves, reminding people to wash their hands. I don't think that changes. I think we will need to find ways to creatively influence and create that social awareness and guide those behaviors so that it becomes intuitive to employees to understand what the 6-foot distance is, how do we engage with each other, how do we use the space, and how do we navigate throughout.
Right. So we're going to ask one more question, and we're going to open it up for the Q&A session for everyone that's joining in. And so my last question for all three of you is, in this time, how can we come together, and how, are ways that you can actually partner with your vendor partners to kind of get through this time?
Yeah, I can start, since I kind of touched on it already a little bit. As a part of any FDOB project, I mentioned engaging not only internal stakeholder but external partners. And what I meant by that is, I mentioned landlords, obviously having these conversations and figuring out how our employees are going to enter the building and flow through the space, but also relying, now that some companies are shrinking the team sizes, or some teams are being affected, really relying and leaning in the vendors. We've been having a lot of discussion with, the janitorial vendor, how do we create this task force now, and the new kind of sanitization group, talking to the pantry vendor. Okay, how do we go from bulk now to packaged goods, but then how do we still maintain, being green and sustainable? So I think just engaging in these conversations with the vendors, picking their brain. I mean, we've had so many discussions where we're just brainstorming, and this is all new to us, but leaning into partners, such as, Insidesource, and figuring out, how can you guys deliver furniture and repurpose furniture in store. Same with, Impec, what technologies are out there, how can we already leverage them? These are the discussions that we're having already.
Great. Okay, I think Rika's going to hop back in, and we're just looking at some of the questions. If anyone has questions, please use the Q&A tab at the bottom.
Yeah, so we're going to take a couple of these that maybe weren't touched upon in depth in our conversation. So the first one, actually, I thought was interesting, kind of relates to culture, which we discussed a little bit, but not too much. Now that we're learning it might be easier to work from home for staff, maybe, won't workplace social spaces become more important so we have a chance to connect? Anyone?
Jen, Julia.
I actually think, we talked about the 4 pillars and culture being one of them. And before, we've spent so much time creating these communities within our walls. And now I think Jen also mentioned, like, how do we extend that community to our home, which has already been an experience, seeing everyone's home and seeing everyone's family. So as workplace leaders now, redefining that culture, and also thinking how we can include people that are working from home. We've seen a lot of successful, really cool events and really cool, happy hours that are virtually done, and, contests, who makes the best drinks and best outfits. So that's been great to see how we can incorporate, and create all, this environment where everybody could feel included. But I think it's very important to create these kind of collisions at work. But I guess going back to, like, how do we do it while being safe, and how do we communicate to employees, and also, with signage, with constant discussions, with these Q&As, with brown bags, with virtual meetings, again, going back to educating employees on what these events would look like and what these spaces are not look like. Maybe the furniture will be a little bit different. Maybe, the spacing will look adjusted, but I think it's on the workplace team to start having these discussions with the leadership team and figuring out what are the trade-offs there.
Great. The next question that I'm seeing that we didn't talk about in detail, are there any companies that you know of that have successfully used hoteling or staggered seating prior to this? I'm curious if they can help provide guidance on technology that can help others make this shift.
I'll take this one if you guys don't mind. Yes, so we actually have several customers that even before that's a 100% agile seating system in place. And you absolutely need a decent technology, but even more than that, you need a really solid process and kind of communication plan around it, so that people know how it works, they know what to expect, they know where to go and how to kind of manage it. So I think it's absolutely possible. We were doing it well before. any of this. I think now this is just going to push people to go to more of that. And I can maybe blend one of the other questions that kind of asks, you know, what if you're at max capacity and how do you kind of manage that? I think it's the same thing through technology and process, right? And a lot of people are already doing it. And we are reaching out on a roadshow and kind of asking, when you feel comfortable with, how will this work? You know, how do you decide who comes to work and who doesn't come to work? What's the process? And like Jujlia said, it might be based on parking. If you only have 53 parking spots, it doesn't really matter if you have 100 seats, if everyone has to drive to work, right? So how do we kind of understand who's coming to work, who's not? A lot of it will depend on cross-functional teams and the function of teams and who needs to be together and interacting and who maybe doesn't. And I think it depends on also how safe people feel, right? Like there's different levels of paranoia. And so it's not up to us to manage it, just to kind of communicate and make sure that people know we're doing all we can to kind of help with that. But there are absolutely people out there that are already doing it and doing it successfully. No seating system is perfect, but it's definitely possible. And you know, a lot of people think you need sensors or really cool technology to do something like that, but you really don't. I think it's really manageable for kind of anyone and everyone that wants to get started on it. So yeah, I think the answer to the question is yes, people are doing it and they have been doing it for a while now.
Great. Next question. How do you think this will change the way all hands meetings work? And what other perks could employers offer if snacks or meals are canceled, which we touched upon briefly?
I think it's going to be a hybrid. I think similar to the 6-foot ring of reality, we can still create a space, but it'll be a very controlled space with a controlled amount of seating to support X amount of people who are RSVP or at all hands. The hybrid be the rest of us dial in via video conferencing. I think with snacks, I don't think, given that right now, as Jujlia mentioned, we are all in a mode of extending the runway, that perks will come back right away. I think it's going to take time before we just start to say we're going to reissue, you know, perks that actually have a lot of spend. I think they took this opportunity to also do the cutbacks, and for good reason.
Great. We are going to take just a couple more questions now. And just a note, there were a few questions asked that we did touch upon maybe earlier in the discussion that perhaps people had missed who joined later. So again, this is going to be recorded and posted on our website. So next question, have you researched space division as an alternative to the 6-foot ring of reality? Thought and concerns with that methodology? Space division. I'm not familiar with that.
Maybe this is more talking about divvying up. I mean, we've seen actually companies moving into looking into physical space dividers. I don't know if this is the question around that. You know, putting actual visual dividers to separate the space so people visually can see. We've seen that for sure, that people are inquiring and looking into furniture solutions to really apply to physical space to create that separation. So definitely been a part of the conversation. Again, as a phase, you know, approach, maybe that's like the first phase for some companies that they feel comfortable. Again, going back to leadership and seeing what is the trade-off. Are we going to be that company? And if that eases our level of anxiety and people can re-enter and feel that workplace provided that, that's great.
Yeah, Insidesource has been doing some research and developing a kit of parts of easy user movable screens for first day of business. And kind of our point of view and approach with this too is, you know, no one has a crystal ball. We don't know how long this is going to be. So really being mindful about sustainability and the whole life cycle product. So as we're starting to purchase things that might not be needed in 12 to 18 months, how can we either, you know, refurbish it or use it for something different?
Yeah, I think I love what Carly said once. Well, we're workplace, we're problem solvers. So this is right up our alley. Throw a problem. Well, you know, that's all what we're doing. We're just trying to figure out how to make a lemonade out of lemons.
Okay, so we're going to do one more question, and actually that chat was a great segue into this one. If social distancing, or excuse me, That is not. Oh yeah, if social distancing becomes the norm, what do we do with excess furniture? Do we leave it in place or remove it? If we remove it, do we leave dead space, or there are good ideas already for using those in-between areas safely?
That's a really good question. Actually, it came up. Carly, did you want to go first?
No, go for it. I think we're going to say the same thing. So
Yeah, so we actually, in our roadshow, we came across one client who had the same questions. First, to Julia's point of what does day one look like, if we were to pull every other chair, as we showed in that image, what could we do with that furniture? And one idea as we talk about engaging with your vendors, one suggestion was to engage with Insidesource, who could take those task chairs and either store it for that future time when we head back to what we think is somewhat normal. The other suggestion we thought was, well, since we're already going to think about implementing a work from home policy, can those task chairs then be distributed out to the workforce as also a cost saving measure and to address some of the ergonomic issues?
Yeah. So that is all the time we have today, as these segments are only 30 minutes. And so I want to thank everyone for tuning in. We actually have people on the line from London, New York, Seattle, and the Bay Area. And so I think that that just shows that this workplace industry is not just an industry, it is a global community, that we are better when we're in this together. And that there is so much uncertainty around, when we'll go back, what new norms are going to be, what the economic, implications of this pandemic are. And so this really is just the beginning, and we really wanted to use this platform to start the conversation and then bring us all together. And so a huge thank you to Jen, Jujlia, and Carly, and to Rika, who's our creative producer. Insidesource is going to continue these conversations every Thursday at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time through the end of April. And next Thursday, we actually will have Pam Keith, who's the VP of Sales and Business Operations for H&I International. She's going to be providing us with an update from China on some of the implications of global manufacturing and procurement, as well as some stories of what it was like to go back to work and some of the obstacles that her and her team faced. And so until next Thursday, I hope that everyone stays safe, connected, and inspired. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.